Good morning, students. This is Asha, your social science teacher. I welcome you to 6th lecture of Civics Chapter 1, the Indian Constitution. Today is the last lecture. This chapter will be finished today. And let's do a quick recap what we studied in this whole chapter. We discussed what constitution is, why it is necessary to have a constitution for any country. Then we discussed preamble. Then we discussed the story of Nepal, how change in power led to change in constitution as well. And then we discussed how in for any country selecting a nature of political system is how important it is, and how constitution lays the principle for selecting a political system, how we choose leader, and what happens if our chosen leader you misuse the power, and how constitution safeguard us by misuse of authority, as well as uh, power of domination of majority, how constitution lays all the principles for saving us from majority, and how constitution help us to save us from ourselves as well. We discussed all these things. Then we discussed important and interesting facts about constitution, our Indian constitution. Then we discussed the key features of Indian constitution. We discussed federalism in detail. We discussed parliamentary form of government. And then we discussed fundamental rights. We discussed about all the 6 fundamental rights. And then we discussed fundamental duties attached with rights, right? This we discussed yesterday, how all rights have corresponding duties attached to them. Now today we'll discuss the fourth uh, feature of our Indian Parliament, Indian Constitution, and that is secularism. A secular state is one which does not officially promote any particular religion. It allows equal freedom of faith and worship to all. So India is a secular country. It does not have its own official religion. It allows all faith to worship whatever they want. So secularism was not originally in our constitution. It was added by 42nd Amendment in 1976 to our constitution. And countries which have their official religion, what are they called? They are called theocratic state. Theocratic states have their official religion, whereas secular countries do not have any religion, but they allow all the countries to follow all the religion to follow their religion. Next is directive principles of a state policy. So in addition to fundamental rights, the constitution also has section called directive principle of state policy. The purpose of this is to ensure social, legal, economic justice to every member of the community. Like fundamental rights are for individual and duties also. Now the directive principle are the obligation of a state or the government towards its people. The directive principle lay down the positive obligation to state to every citizen, to every individual, what he requires, like living wage, humane condition of work, education for children, clean environment, justice on equal basis. All these are the responsibilities. It's laid positive obligation on state that individual living in your area should get this. He or she should have humane condition for living, working wages should be right, clean environment, education, water. Under we have Article 21, right to life, in which all these are made as a fundamental right of an individual, which a state should ensure. Here, when I use word state, it means the government should ensure that individual in its country or in a state are getting all these facilities. Right, children? So these were the directive principles of a state policy. By this, we come to an end of this chapter, and now we'll discuss the key terms, and then we'll discuss question answer. So the first key term over here is constituent assembly. It is assembly of people representing it is who frame the constitution. So people who frame the constitution were called constituent assembly. Constitutional amendment, the change in the constitution made by supreme legislative body. It is known as constitutional amendment. Draft, plan or a preliminary sketch. If you make any plan or any kind of a sketch plan, that is known as draft. Polity, a society that has an organized political structure. India is a democratic polity, right? It's an example. Preamble, summary of objectives and basics philosophy of constitution, or you can say an introduction to constitution is known as preamble. Sovereign, sovereign means absolute and supreme power which is not subject to any outside control. So it is India which is sovereign, it is not under the control of any outside power. Tyranny means cruel and unjust use of power. Universal adult franchise, I believe you all know, the right to all adults, both men and women, to vote. Secular, secular means they are not connected to any particular religion and they allow all religion to function properly. Republic, a state that has elected president rather than monarch. So India is a republic because our president is elected. Custodian, a person or an institution that takes responsibility for making care of someone or something. So a custodian means that. Now let's move on to question answer. Why does democratic country need a constitution? We have already discussed this, but we can do it once again. In democratic country, leaders are chosen by the people. These leaders are expected to exercise power responsibly on our behalf. So we choose them and they exercise their power responsibly. But there is a possibility that these leaders might misuse the power. So the constitution provides safeguard against this. But in case these chosen leaders misuse power, so constitution has a safeguard to protect us. That's why we need a constitution to protect us from all these things. Now question number 2. So let me take you to book. Here you can see a question number 2. It's a table which tells us Constitution of Nepal like this and Constitution of Nepal in 2007. So 1990 and 2007 interim constitution. So we need to identify, look at the wordlines of the two documents given below. The first column is the form of 1990 Nepal Constitution. The second column is the form of more recent interim Constitution Nepal. So you need to study, read out the words and what it means. Here, what is the difference in who exercise executive power in the above two Constitution of Nepal? Keeping this in mind, why do you think Nepal needs a new constitution? So what are the wordings? Article 35 of 1990 Constitution. Executive power, the executive power of the Kingdom of Nepal shall be exercised exclusively by Majesty, means king. The executive power of Nepal shall, pursuant to this constitution and other laws, be vested in Council of Ministers. So here see, the Constitution of 2007 says the executive power should be under Council of Ministers, whereas this one says His Majesty, means king. So the 1990 Constitution of Nepal, it was king who was exercised the executive power, while in 2007 interim constitution Nepal, it is the Prime Minister, the leader of representative people, exercise the executive power. That's the difference which we can make out. Now, what happened if there was no restriction on the powers of elected representative? Suppose there is no restrictions to any elected representative. What will happen? There would be an anarchy when it is of, there is no nothing in proper condition. There should be some constitutional and legal restriction on powers of the elected representatives. Obviously, there should be always some restriction to their powers. If there is no restriction, then the elected representatives will misuse the power for their selfish interest, and they will not serve the people. They will stop serving people and they will start serving their own purposes. The Constitution limits the powers of elected representatives in many ways. Generally, the powers of elected representatives are limited by giving fundamental rights to the citizen. That we have discussed in the chapter, how fundamental rights are given to each and every citizen so that the authority cannot misuse their power. In each of the following situation, identify the minority. So this question, write one reason why you think it is important to represent the views of minority in each of this situation. So there are situations given and we need to discuss. A school with 30 teachers, 20 of them male. So what you understand? Females are in minority. It is important to respect their views because they also contribute to the standard of teaching of school. Yes, you should. Now the second scenario, in a city 5% population is Buddhist. So Buddhists are minority. Their view must be respected. Next situation, in a factory mess, all employees 80% are vegetarian. Non-vegetarians obviously in this scenario are a minority. Their views must be respected because they are also human beings like those of vegetarians. Now the fifth scenario, in a class of 50 students, 40 belong to more well-off families. So the 10% poor middle class students are in minority. We must respect their view because they are equal to others. So now let's move on to the next column. The column of the left side, some keys or feature of Indian Constitution, and write two sentences in a word. So here we'll discuss the key features. First is the federalism. Federalism helps to manage vast country smoothly. Distribution of power makes progress of country fast. Now next is separation of power. The three organs of state, that is legislative, executive and judiciary, exercise different powers. Thus such organs act like a check on the organ of the state and ensure balance. And now fundamental rights, which we have already discussed. Fundamental rights protect citizens against the absolute exercise of power by the state. These rights are essential for individual to develop his or her personality and lead a life with decency. Next is parliamentary form of government. It gives chance to people of a country to play a role in electing their representative. Also, every citizen of the country can contest a election. So children, by this we come to an end of this chapter, and tomorrow's lecture will start with history. Thank you.